Gentlemen, we got crushed week one. Probably going to get crushed week two. I told y'all we were profitable last year with these player props, but Trey Lance may or may not have bailed us out near the end of the season. So let's go through. Let's see if we can turn this ship around. And I'm going to do this a little bit differently. Instead of going through and looking game by game and looking at all the player props, I know that 90% of y'all have already signed up for Underdog Fantasy. Of course, if you want to go see any of these player props, if you want to get into drafts with us, which we are doing nightly on the live stream, yes, you can still draft a best ball teams during the year. Make sure you go sign up for Underdog. Available in damn near every single state. And when you use promo code FLOCK, when you sign up for Underdog Fantasy, they're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to 100. So it's essentially free to check out. You're going to get our 2022 fantasy football rankings at the same time, and you'll support this channel. So what I want to do is I want to go through and look at my top 5 player props that we found this week. And then I'm going to open it up for y'all in the live chat. And I want your opinion, where then we can go through and we can look at your favorite player props near the end of the video. But of course, you can see a lot of them right here. I know the majority of y'all have already made your player prop bets. We are a little bit late for this on Saturday. So let's go through. Let's dive into our first one here. And of course, you know what it's going to be. We got to go through, hit them with the University of Texas over. Now here, Bijan Robinson, Jordan Whittington, and Xavier Worthy. I don't see how these overs don't hit. It's the University of course. I have no idea what we're doing here. I mean, I'm just using this as a joke. Of course, they have college player props if you want to check those out. But for the love of God, if y'all think I am bad at NFL player props, I would be even worse at this. I'm not recommending this, mainly just a joke. Let's go through. Let's look at our first player prop here. This is going to be the under for Nico Collins. I mean, if we're going through and looking at Nico Collins, I understand, yes, he's the wide receiver 2 for the Houston Texans. No John Mechie. He is in a pretty good spot. But at the same time, this was the same situation he was in a year ago. And if we look at the Nico Collins under, this 40.5 receiving yards, not only did this hit in week 1 this year, where we have to remember the overall context of this game between the Houston Texans and the Indianapolis Colts. If you would ever think that Nico Collins was going to be able to go out there and he was going to be able to get 40.5 receiving yards, it should have been in that Colts game. That Colts game lasted 70 minutes, but let's not even focus in on week 1 because, of course, week 1 was a single game sample. Instead, if we take a step back, if we look at his rookie season last year as well, the majority of the unders here have been hitting for Nico Collins. I am going to be completely fine going through and taking the under at 40.5 receiving yards. But y'all know I am not the biggest Davis Mills fan. I know we have a large chunk of this channel, a large chunk of people who play fantasy football in general that think Davis Mills is the quote unquote most underrated quarterback in the NFL. I'm not buying it. Our next over under, I literally looked at this and I went, oh, I wonder if the under on Lamar Jackson's passing attempts is appealing. I mean, this is a team that gets back J.K. Dobbins this week. Y'all know I love me some J.K. Dobbins, but if we take a step back, if we look at what we've had from Lamar Jackson over the past 2 years, and yes, last year was an outlier. If we go back and look at his first season starting, look at 2019 or look at 2020. I mean, the Baltimore Ravens here do not let the passing attempts flow in Baltimore. I mean, they look to run the ball over and over and over again. And I think that they are going to be trying to get back to that. However, this should be a competitive game between the Miami Dolphins. Not saying that Miami's going to win this game by any means. No. I think it's a competitive game where Lamar Jackson actually has to keep throwing the ball. And Lamar Jackson has slowly but surely been transitioning as a quarterback. Now, of course, like I said, there are a couple different variables for this. Last year, where you had the injuries to all the running backs. At the same time, you had some key defensive playmakers going down, causing the Baltimore Ravens to play from behind more than we would expect this season. So, in general, I am not expecting Lamar to throw the ball as much as he did last year. I'm not expecting Lamar to have to throw the ball as much as he did week 1. But week 1 against the Jets, hell, they boat raced them. If you thought that the Baltimore Ravens were going to go back to being that run-heavy team, which they eventually will, but to be the league leader in rush attempts, you would assume that we saw some semblance of that against the New York Jets in week 1, but that didn't happen. If we go through, look at the last 12 games for Lamar Jackson, last season and this year, he has hit 30 passing attempts in 10 out of those last 12 games. Should be a competitive contest against the Miami Dolphins. Don't love this, which is why it sits at number 4 for us. Of course, all these player props are going to be so damn hard to beat. But now our next guy, We're going to go over to Michael Thomas here. Now with Michael Thomas, I think a big chunk of the reason I want to go with is over at 54.5 receiving yards is going to be the availability of Alvin Kamara. What you should probably do with this Michael Thomas is over is I think we should go through and we should wait to hear about the availability of Alvin Kamara later today. If Alvin Kamara is going to be missing on Sunday, if we just think about the running backs that will be replacing Kamara from a target share perspective, there is no way you can expect them to be taking half the amount of targets that Alvin Kamara would have in New Orleans. I think that those targets go to wide receivers that operate a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage. We know that has been Michael Thomas throughout his NFL career. I think it's going to be a completely fine point to just go through, jam in Michael Thomas. I mean, he hit this over last week. And if we go through and look at what happened last week, you had Jarvis Landry with double-digit targets. Not only did you have Jarvis Landry with double-digit targets, but at the same time, you had Taysom Hill breaking off a long rushing touchdown. It's hard to say that that's going to happen every single week going forward. What I think we see is Michael Thomas, now that he's fully healthy, playing more snaps and hopefully taking more volume in this offense. But I think this is a safe bet if Kamara misses. And now our next bet is going to be Mr. Tom Brady here. Now with the Bucs, I know everybody's concerned saying you can't play Mike Evans. Mike Evans, horrible matchup going up against Lattimore. We know that the New Orleans Saints historically have been very good against Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, at least trying to remove Mike Evans. I mean, if you go through, look at the Mike Evans over-under. I mean, underdogs very aggressive on Evans, but I understand why. Because this is a Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receiver room that doesn't have Chris Godwin, that is a banged-up Mike Evans, that is a banged-up Julio Jones. I mean, both of those wide receivers missed all practice. I mean, all week of practices leading up until Friday, where they finally got in limited sessions. With Mike Evans, it was the calf. With Julio Jones, it was the knee. So if we look at the banged up wide receiver room and look at the last 4 games that you've had from Tom Brady going up against the New Orleans Saints, keep in mind, he's only been in Tampa for 2 years, so we have 4 games to look at. He has thrown an interception in every single one of those games, and in the majority of those games, he's thrown multiple. So I think Tom Brady over half a reception is going to be a pretty good spot. And now our number one player prop of the week is going to be Najee Harris. I'm not going to lie to you, I kind of like a couple of these Najee Harris lines, but this 2.5 receptions mark is beautiful. There's a large chunk of the fantasy football community that is very concerned about what you have with Najee Harris at this point, because you are looking at Najee Harris as a running back that disappointed this past week, as this was a disappointing offense in general, and this is going to be a bad offensive line. He has Mitchell Trubisky. He's coming off an injury. I get it. There are a lot of concerns with Najee Harris, but I am not concerned about that injury anymore. I mean, Najee Harris practicing in full. Najee Harris not even on the injury report to end the week. So if he's not on the injury report, is this something that we actually need to be worried about? Personally, I don't think so. And now I understand, I know what you're going to tell me. Well, Mason, last year he had Ben Roethlisberger. Ben Roethlisberger had no mobility at all. So yes, we're going to expect that his targets for Najee Harris were going to be through the roof. When the pocket collapsed, he had no other option but to dump the ball off to Najee Harris, where you can see Trubisky extend plays. You can see Trubisky run the ball, and he's not going to have to dump the ball off as often as what Ben Roethlisberger did. That is a completely fair point. And I do think that Najee Harris has less targets this year than what we saw a year ago. I mean, remember, last year, Najee Harris had a single week with 19 targets. Najee Harris in 1 week last year had 19 targets. You thought Michael Thomas was, you thought Devontae Adams with 17 was a lot week 1? No, Najee Harris crushed that last year in a single week. But if we don't even look at the averages, because the averages for Najee Harris a year ago are going to be skewed because that 19 target week, he has hit the over. He has hit 3 receptions on a whopping 17 of his last 18 games. 17 of the last 18 games for Najee Harris, he's had 3 or more receptions. So yes, we are going to be expecting this to get scaled back with Trubisky, as I already said, but I'm not worried about the injury. Maybe it's a tough matchup where he doesn't have a lot of touchdown upside. Maybe it's a tough matchup where the yardage total's a little lower, but from a reception standpoint, I'm not expecting the New England Patriots to just ball hog every single time Trubisky tries to go down there and dump the ball off to Najee Harris. This is my favorite player prop of the week. One other that I like with Najee Harris, I'm not going to lie, I think people are a little bit too concerned with these injuries here. I like the over on Najee Harris Najee Harris minus 6.5 total yards compared to Damian Harris. I mean, with Damian Harris, I understand. Yes, we have no Ty Montgomery this week. No Ty Montgomery is going to make me, in general, more excited about both Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson, because this goes from being a 3-man running back by committee to this is now a 2-man running back by committee in New England, but it's still a running back by committee where Najee Harris is still getting every single touch, especially as a pass catcher as well. So I actually really like the bet of going through and taking the over on Najee. But let's go through, let's look at the rest of these. And what I want to ask from you now, we talked about this at the beginning, but please go to the live chat. Let me know what your favorite player prop of the week is. I know we have a lot of people that fill us in on live streams when we're answering fantasy football questions, what their favorite player props are on Underdog and what we should look at. I mean, we've already gone through, gave you my favorite. I really like the Najee Harris 2.5 receptions over. But let me know what y'all like. I mean, going back, I mean, here, if you take like any Kamara unders, just to explain how this works, if you were to take an Alvin Kamara under and then Alvin Kamara ends up missing the week, you don't hit that under. It's just a wash. It's just removed. So don't think you can go, oh, Alvin Kamara may not play. Let's take the under. And then if he doesn't play, you automatically win. That's not how it works. It will just be washed. But if you took like the over on Michael Thomas and then Alvin Kamara missed, obviously making Michael Thomas more appealing, then your over would still hit, obviously. But Tyler says his favorite is going to be the Antonio Gibson, 80.5 total yards. Okay, let's go through. Let's check this out here. So Antonio Gibson, 84.5 total yards. With Gibson, led Washington in receiving last week. Let me look at the official total. Now, I will say this is probably a nice line because if we are going through and looking at what we had with the Detroit Lions, we've been talking about this being a great matchup, where the Philadelphia Eagles a week ago had 4 rushing touchdowns, where Jalen Hurts himself had 90 rushing yards. Obviously, Jalen Hurts a little bit different, but Miles Sanders crushed this as well. I mean, last week, if we're looking at this, Antonio Gibson, if my math is correct, had about 130 total yards. So let me know in the live chat. Are y'all liking this? Would y'all prefer to go for the over on the total yards or the over on rushing or receiving? You know what? If we add up the rushing and receiving here, that would be about 79 and that. I mean, that would be about, let's just call it 80 total yards. Let me know. Would y'all prefer to go for the straight up total on Antonio Gibson, or would y'all be preferring to go with rushing or receiving? And Matthias says, Amon-Ra St. Brown to score a touchdown. Let me look at this. I don't necessarily know if I would love that bet. Let's look at the Amon-Ra St. Brown totals here. Okay, so we don't have that lineup right now for Amon-Ra St. Brown touchdown or not. Honestly, I feel like that would be a stay away regardless. With Amon-Ra St. Brown, if you thought that DeAndre Swift had a possibility of missing this week, maybe you could be very excited to go through and take the Amon-Ra St. Brown over on receptions. However, it looks like DeAndre Swift's going to be playing. But I think that should be it. Let me know how y'all liked this new format of me going through and me looking at just my top 5 player props, letting you know what they are, asking what your favorites are as well. But we will be live again later today with the most up-to-date injury news that we have for pretty much any fantasy football important player. And also, I'll be live tonight answering all your fantasy football questions. Of course, if you want to get into a best ball draft with us during this season, we're doing it every single night. Or if you want to check out any of these player props, make sure you go sign up for Underdog Fantasy. You can find the link in the live chat. You can find it in the description of the video. When you sign up for Underdog Fantasy and use promo code FLOCK, they're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to 100. You'll get our 2022 fantasy football rankings. You can have some fun, hop into some best ball drafts, and you can go check out these player props. But thank you again. I appreciate you. And I hope I get to see you with the live stream later today with the injury updates and then the live stream tonight where we're answering questions.